It's very exciting for me to talk to you this morning, or this afternoon, actually. And I'm going to mostly describe the Texas School Ready system, since that's what we're a lot about today. And what's really exciting for me is to talk about how some of the things we heard this morning, many of the things we heard this morning from Drs. Pianta and Whitehurst, validate many of the things that are incorporated into the Texas School Ready program. You've already heard about the incredible challenge we have in Texas. I find it just amazing to hear that the children we're serving in this program equal the number of pre-K children in 3 other states in the nation. So we have a big challenge, and we really have to get it right, since, as you'll see in this slide, by 2040, the school enrollment in Texas will double. What I want to focus on for a second is that we actually do know quite a bit, and that was mentioned earlier today. We know a lot about how critically important this early period of development is from our neuroscience research, that it's when the brain is really actively developing, and that development is happening in response to the quality of stimulation in the environment. So when we hear about quality pre-K programs, that's what we're talking about. The brain is developing in response to that stimulation. We haven't talked about this yet today. The National Early Literacy Panel report is a very important piece of work that came out a little over a year ago that really, for the first time, tells us we don't have to keep arguing, guessing, questioning what things in the early childhood period are important for reading success, reading, spelling, writing in elementary school. We know from this report that from all the research that was done and reviewed in this report, alphabet knowledge, phonological awareness, really being fluent with letters, writing, early writing skills, knowing about print and why it's important in our world, and a broad range of language skills are what children need to have skills in order to be ready for school. So this is a clear body of knowledge that can inform what we put in place. Another part of this report that gets much less attention is the second question addressed, which is what are the interventions in the research that work, that actually, if they're done in early childhood, they can improve children's language, emergent literacy skills, and there's a lot of them, code-focused, meaning those programs that are working on children's emergent literacy skills, if they are done 10 minutes at a time in small groups, incredibly targeted, focused ways, we get dramatic changes in children's learning of these skills. We get it from classroom practices, from shared reading programs. So we know more now about what does work to change children's skills. And we know from theoretical frameworks that just what you heard from Dr. Pianta, the importance of responsive interactions, quality interactions between teachers and children, is the very area that supports this higher level of learning over what children might be able to do on their own. This is known as the zone of proximal development from the sociocultural frameworks. So if we pay attention to all these important pieces of knowledge and put them together in a comprehensive, integrated approach, the Texas School Ready program feels like it can get the job done in terms of preparing teachers. So together we know these emergent literacy skills need to be a focus, a heavy emphasis on language development, math, social-emotional, and then we're learning a lot more about early science skills. We know it has to be in a supportive, high-quality interaction style. And so what we have proposed is a recipe, basically. Dr. Whitehurst said curriculum is critical, but it's one little percentage of what's important in this big recipe of critical indicators. And so we are focusing on at least these 6 key ingredients for our recipe to bake our school readiness cake in the most effective, delicious way we possibly can. And the first ingredient, which we need a huge cupful, is that responsive interaction style. Then the content in literacy, language, math, which comes in part from the curriculum. What we haven't talked much about, but I'd like to highlight in this talk, is how we help our teachers plan so that children develop concepts and memories. How we get a balance of teaching instructional strategies going, flexible groupings, and that key assessment progress monitoring or screening approach. The key responsiveness areas, in addition to that rich stimulation, one of the most frequently reported predictors of good child outcomes is contingent responsiveness. The child signaling, I've got an interest here, Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones saying, you do? You like doing that puzzle? Well, let's talk about that puzzle. The child gets a response that's prompt, sensitive to their interest, and in turn, the child feels acknowledged and knows that if that cycle keeps happening, this is a person they can trust will pay attention to them. That promotes not only cognitive learning, but social learning. So we're going to put our responsive interaction styles together with our content and then add into our mix in this recipe this planning piece, the balance of teaching strategies, and flexible groupings. The content needs to include, this is that important curriculum that you can get for the good one for the same amount of money that you can buy the not so good one or very ineffective one. It's got to have these key predictors of reading. The teachers have to have good scope and sequence in a curriculum that tells them how to introduce, when to introduce, which activities across the year in these learning areas. While we don't know as much about math, we know it's important in early childhood. And right now, best practices says, let's really be sure children get a broad range of early math experiences, which also have a lot of language-rich content embedded in them. Let's be sure we emphasize all aspects of social-emotional, not just getting along or following a request of the teacher, but also beginning to understand how children need to be supported to learn that other kids, other adults have different belief systems sometimes, different perspectives, and that they can learn to appreciate those. So we put that huge white box at the bottom of this is that responsive quality interaction. That's the scaffolding. That's the thing you can measure. You can measure teachers knowing when and how to demonstrate, knowing when and how to say the right thing to build the child's understanding of a new concept. So all of those rich interactional styles are there holding up, and embedded in that is this content on the top.